You're driving home from dinner with a couple you know. Nice apartment, nice jobs, nice everything. And one of them said something offhand, nothing dramatic, just a throwaway comment about how they don't really talk anymore. And the table went quiet for exactly 1 second before someone changed the subject. You thought about it the whole drive home. Not because their relationship is falling apart, but because it looked so intact. From every angle that anyone outside of it can see, it looked like something worth having, and now you're wondering about the ones who leave those. The people who walk away from relationships that everyone else thought were perfect, who hand back the apartment, the shared Instagram, the holiday dinners, the thing they spent years building, and try to explain why to people who never understood the question. Everyone around them says the same thing. They had everything. What more did they want? That question. That's what this is about. There are two versions of every relationship. The one that exists when other people are watching, and the one that exists at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday when nobody's watching anything. The outside version is what gets photographed, what gets described at family dinners, what gets measured against other relationships and found to be good, stable, successful, a couple that doesn't fight in public, a partnership that makes sense on paper. The inside version is quieter, harder to name. It lives in the space between two people lying in the same bed facing opposite walls, in the conversations that start and then don't quite finish, in the feeling of being completely known by someone and somehow still completely alone. Most people who leave weren't leaving the outside version. They were already gone from the inside, long before the conversation, long before the decision, long before anyone else knew there was anything to decide. The gap between those two versions is where this story actually lives. There's a kind of relationship that looks like everything it's supposed to be. Mutual respect, shared goals, no dramatic betrayal, no visible dysfunction, no obvious villain. Just two people who are kind to each other in general ways, who function well together as a unit, who have built something that, by every external metric, is working, and one of them quietly, privately starts to feel like they are disappearing, not because they're being mistreated, not because anything is technically wrong, but because there is a difference between a relationship that doesn't hurt you and a relationship that actually reaches you, between someone who is good to you and someone who genuinely sees you. You can be treated well by someone who doesn't really know you. You can be completely safe with someone you never feel fully yourself with. And there is a kind of loneliness specific to that situation, the loneliness of being chosen by someone who chose a version of you that isn't quite the real one. That loneliness is almost impossible to explain to people on the outside, because from the outside, being chosen looks like enough, being treated well looks like enough, having stability looks like more than enough. But the person living inside it knows the difference, even if they can't say it yet. It rarely happens all at once. That's part of what makes it so hard to name. It starts small, a sentence you left unfinished because you already knew how it would land, a feeling you tucked away because explaining it seemed like more effort than it was worth. A version of yourself, the stranger one, the messier one, the one with the opinions that don't quite fit the relationship, slowly going quiet, and you keep going, because the relationship is good. Because leaving good things is something you're supposed to require a reason for, and the thing you're feeling doesn't feel like a reason. It feels like ingratitude. So you adjust. You make yourself smaller in the places that create friction. You lean into the parts of yourself that fit. And gradually, without a single dramatic moment, you've edited yourself into someone who fits this relationship perfectly. Someone who is happy, technically. Someone who has everything they said they wanted. Someone who would struggle to explain, if pressed, why they feel like they're standing slightly outside their own life. This is what erosion looks like. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't leave a mark anyone else can see. It just accumulates, quietly, privately, until the person in the mirror feels like a stranger wearing familiar clothing. When someone leaves a relationship like this, the question everyone asks is, what were they looking for? The assumption is that they left for something better. Someone more exciting, a grass is greener situation, chasing feeling instead of choosing stability. But that framing misses almost everything. Most people who leave these relationships aren't running towards something. They're trying to return to themselves. They're leaving because they've noticed, usually after years, that the person they are inside this relationship is not the person they actually are, and that the distance between those two people has been growing so long it now feels impossible to close from the inside. What they're leaving isn't their partner. Not really. They're leaving the version of themselves that they became in order to stay. They're leaving the long, quiet compromise they didn't consciously agree to, but somehow made anyway. And they're leaving because they've started to believe, tentatively, guiltily, terrifyingly, that being known matters, that being met fully by another person is not a luxury or an unrealistic expectation, that intimacy is not just the absence of conflict. That love, real love, should make you feel more like yourself, not less. That belief, when it finally surfaces, is the beginning of the end. Here's what nobody warns you about. The leaving doesn't feel like relief, or it does sometimes briefly, and then the guilt arrives. Because you left something that, by every shared measure of what a good relationship is, was good. You hurt someone who didn't deserve to be hurt. You broke something that wasn't broken in any way that anyone else could see. And you did it for a reason that sounds, when you try to say it out loud, like something from a self-help book you're slightly embarrassed to have read. I needed to feel more like myself. I needed to feel seen. I needed something I couldn't name. These sentences don't hold up well at dinner parties. They don't hold up well when you're watching someone you cared about try to understand what happened. They sound thin against the weight of a shared life, flimsy against the evidence that everything was fine. And so you carry both things at once, the knowledge that you made the right decision, and the guilt of having made it at all. That coexistence, right decision, real damage, is something the people who leave these relationships live with for a long time. The ones who stayed would have lived with something too, just something quieter, something easier to explain. And then there's the other person, who did nothing wrong, who was kind, who showed up, who built something real and durable and good, and still home one day to someone who was already halfway gone. Their experience of this is its own specific grief, not just loss but confusion, because the story doesn't have a villain. Because they can replay the relationship and find no single moment where they failed. Because the person who left couldn't fully explain it, which means they're left constructing the explanation themselves, from the inside, with incomplete information. That's a particular kind of wound, the kind that doesn't come with a clear cause. And without a clear cause, people tend to find one anyway. They decide they weren't enough. They decide they were too much. They decide they should have been different, should have tried harder, should have seen it coming. Most of the time, none of that is true. The relationship wasn't a failure of effort or attention or love. It was a mismatch, possibly one that couldn't have been seen clearly until years in, until the moment when one person looked up and realized the fit had never quite been right, even when everything looked like it was. That doesn't make it less devastating. It just means the devastation has nowhere to land. People don't stay in these relationships because they're foolish. They stay because leaving a good thing feels like a moral failure, and the human mind will almost anything to avoid that conclusion. So they wait for a sign, something concrete, something that would justify the feeling they've been carrying, something they could point to and say, there, that's why, that's the reason. Sometimes the sign comes. The relationship deteriorates into conflict, or someone finds someone else, or the quiet erosion finally becomes visible. And then the leaving is easier to explain, even if it's harder to survive. But sometimes the sign never comes. The relationship stays good, technically, visibly, on paper. And the person stays in it, indefinitely, waiting for permission to name a problem that doesn't look like a problem from any angle they can show anyone else. This is one of the loneliest places a person can be, not in a bad relationship, in a good one that doesn't fit. with no language for the difference, with no permission to want something that can't be defended with evidence. And so they stay, and they adjust, and they edit, and they wait, until one day the weight of the accumulated waiting becomes heavier than the weight of leaving. The quiet truth underneath all of this, the one that's hard to say because it sounds like too much to ask, is that people need more than good. They need to be known, specifically, accurately, in the parts that are difficult to know. Not just accepted, but seen. Not just loved, but recognized as the actual person they are, not the convenient version. And some relationships, through no one's particular fault, never get there. They stay on the surface. They stay comfortable and functional and visibly successful. And one person inside them, maybe both, learns to live with a door that was never fully opened. The people who leave aren't braver. They're not more evolved. They're not chasing something unrealistic. They just reached a point where they couldn't pretend the door was open any longer. Someday, maybe, the ones they left will reach the same point with someone new. And that new relationship might look messier from the outside, less polished, harder to explain, but somewhere inside it, both people will feel, finally, quietly, fully, that they are actually, honestly there. That's not everything, but it's not nothing either. It might be the whole thing.